In the previous video, we created these three frames. The first one is just a simple rectangular frame. The second one has rounded corners on it. And then the third one is an ellipse. We can edit the transparency around the edges of these frames using effects. The effects here in InDesign can be found under the effects icon, and we have three different types of feathering: basic feather, directional feather, and gradient feather. Let me use the basic feather first of all in this selected frame on the left. So I click on basic feather, and first of all I click on preview to see what's happening. So as you can see, basic feather will work on all the edges with the same amount of feathering. So if I increase the feather width here, it will change the feathering on all the edges. I can also choose choke, which will make it a bit more stronger or very sharp if we drag it all the way up to 100%. So we can change the fall off of this effect, and we can also add a bit of noise on the edges or no noise at all. And we can also choose what type of corners we want. We want rounded, sharp, or diffuse corners. So that is basic feathering. Let me click on OK. Now let me select this one here on the right, and I will add directional feather on this. So I click on directional feather, and again I move it away a little bit just to see what's happening. And here I can now separate feathering for each of the sides: top, bottom, left, and right. Or I can also set an angle here. I'm going to keep the angle on 0 degrees. Let me just type in 0 for it. And let's just say I would like to have a feathering from the top. So I'm going to add feathering from the top like that. And you can see, because of the rounded corners, I have a nice feathering here. But we can always change the shape. Instead of leading edges, we can say all edges or first edge only. And then it won't consider using the rounded corners, so it won't follow the transparency, the corners. It will just simply come from top to bottom. If we set it back to leading edges, then it will have that shape, the rounded corner shapes, also inside the feathering. And then if I decide, I can add feathering from the right. Once again, just so you understand, here we can also see if we set it to first edge only, it will be different than the leading edges. And I can also change the choke, noise, and the angle of this feature. Let me just set this back to 0 and also the right to 0. So we will only have feathering from the top. That's why it's called directional feather. Let me click on OK, and let me show you the last type of feathering on this image at the bottom. So I'm going to Effects and choose Gradient Feather. Once I click on Gradient Feather, I can choose linear or radial, and we can change the gradient itself here on the top, and also the angle, of course. So it's quite similar to directional feather, with the difference that here we have these swatches which can control the fall off. So for example, I can move them closer to each other, and then the feathering will be much more subtle here on the right. Or I can move them a little bit to the left and then get them close to each other, and then there will be a very drastic difference between the transparency and the image itself. We can also add new stops by clicking on the gradient or below the gradient, and we can change the color or opacity of these color stops by using opacity. So if I reduce it, as you can see, we change the color stop itself. So we can have very interesting gradients created here in InDesign, and that can help us to create something that we want to achieve in the image. And remember, you can always turn to radial, which is again creates an interesting effect in this case. And you can always reverse the gradient as well with this icon here on the right. So that's all what you need to know about feathering, and we can have a better preview if I pressed W in InDesign. That will give us the print preview. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed this course about masking techniques in these three applications.